Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. Thought I would do a quick vinyl finds update, which is really late. These are records that I picked up before the lockdown. It's just odds and socks, nothing wildly exciting. I do have some really nice VCLT to show as well, and I want to do a few VC channel shoutouts. Okay, so let's whiz through and not take too long over it. So before the lockdown happened, I went to my local antique centre and I picked up a really nice upgrade copy of this record. This is Nielsen Sings Newman, Harry Nielsen singing the songs of Randy Newman. This is an absolutely brilliant record. I'm sure lots of people will have heard of this or heard it. I had a very scratchy, beaten up copy which I wasn't very happy with, so I was delighted to find this. I think it cost me about a tenner. It seems to be an American copy. It's got some great songs on it. Love Story, Yellow Man, you know, really kind of atmospheric southern pop music, I suppose you describe it as. You know, Randy Newman was a unique songwriting voice, and Nielsen was a great interpreter of his music. Love that cover as well. Brilliant record. This one was a charity shop find. I saw Headley show this the week that I bought it. This is Dobie Gray and his album Hey Dixie. Dobie Gray was famous for having done the big mod hit in the 60s, which was The In Crowd. But this album and his career in general was more characterised overall by a kind of lighter country soul kind of sound. This album is very laid back, very mellow. You can see Dobie there in his wicker chair. I don't think that was his garden, but yeah, that's a nice enough record. It's kind of pleasant enough. It's quite kind of easy on the ear. You know, it slips down. This next record was actually a bit of a disappointment. This is T-Bone Burnett and the album Talking Animals. Now, I knew about this guy, obviously. You know, he came up in the 1970s working with Bob Dylan in a live capacity, I think, originally, and he went on to produce all sorts of great records. You know, he produced King of America by Elvis Costello and all sorts of other things. And I always like his production style. His production style, it's an interesting mixture of sort of rootsiness, but it also has a kind of 80s sheen to it. Not sort of 80s that you think of, you know, like Depeche Mode, but in the 80s he had a way of doing modern sounding records that were also quite rootsy. So I picked this up. This is a solo album he made in 1987, and it's got a good lineup of people on it. It's got Mitchell Froom, it's got Tony Levin on bass, you know, sort of big hard hitters. Bono is on it, but the album, it's kind of his voice. I struggle a little bit with his voice. His voice is very one note. It's got this very kind of reedy quality to it, and it's not a very versatile voice. It's always the same. It's just the same sound all the time, you know. And the songs are okay, but overall I was a bit disappointed. I've given it three turns on the turntable so far, and I haven't been particularly taken with it, so I don't know, maybe that will change. But anyway, it was an interesting pickup. It was worth getting it just to see what his solo work was like. If anybody knows of any other records that he did which are maybe better than this one, I'd be happy to take your recommendations. This next one, again, was a bit disappointing, except it wasn't disappointing because I knew that this was a bit of a patchwork album. This is Land of Dreams by Randy Newman, which was an album he made in, I think it was 1988. It was part produced by Mark Knopfler, part produced by Jeff Lynne. I think Jeff Lynne only produces one song on it. And then the rest was produced by James Newton Howard and Tommy Lipuma. Not sure if I got that pronounced right. This record was meant to be Randy Newman's attempt to do a sort of concept album about his childhood or him growing up in the deep south in America. The problem with the album is that half the tracks do have that kind of rootsy quality, and half of them are saddled with a fairly dated 80s sound. The Jeff Lynne song actually is the least worst of the kind of 80s production songs. There's a couple of songs on here which really do the kind of real kind of bang clatter. What it reminds me of is the Tom Petty album Southern Accents, where you've got half the tracks are done in this very rootsy style and half of them are done in this rather anachronistic 80s production sound. So it's a bit of a shame. It was a thing that happened in the 80s. I think these big stars who'd gone around the block a little bit, they decided to start making records with lots of different producers helping them. It was almost like hedging their bets. You know, I think record companies, you know, even people like Paul McCartney did it. It was that thing of, okay, let's try 2 songs with this producer and 2 songs with that producer and see if we can get a hit, rather than doing something more sort of, you know, integrated, as would have been done in the 1970s. But I do collect Randy's records, so I don't regret picking that up. And it is an enjoyable album, don't get me wrong, it's not a terrible record. I just wish that it had been done with a more consistent sound, really. Right, next one, just a cheapie. Elton John, Caribou, picked this up from Bernardo's for a couple of quid. I never thought I would end up with a collection of 1970s Elton albums, but it has happened. It's largely happened through Richard McCook sending me lots of these LPs from the 1970s, and then I've started to plug the gaps as well, you know. I was never a big Elton John fan back in the day, but I must admit I really started to enjoy these classic 1970s albums, and this one is one of his classics, but this is a really good album. I really enjoyed it. It's got his great song Ticking, which is the last song on side 2, which is a really powerful song, but God help us, look at that cover. That is bad, isn't it? Is it meant to be bad? I don't know. Right, next one was mail order. I've been trying to complete the Paul Simon collection, so I grabbed a copy of his album One Trick Pony, which came from the movie of the same name back in, I think it was 1981. This is quite a nice album. It's got a few 80s touches to it. There's a kind of 80s keyboard that runs through it, but it's quite a cool sound. I think it might be like a Rhodes piano or some kind of electronic piano, but it's got a kind of late night vibey kind of sound to it. Late in the Evening is the standout track, the first song on side 1. But there's some other good songs. There's a couple of live songs on here as well, so it was just one for the collection. I've almost completed the Paul Simon collection now. I think it's one of his 90s albums I've yet to get on CD, but I am getting there with Paul. So that was a nice eBay purchase. I think it was eBay. This one, really chuffed to get this. Picked this up from Heightside Records, my local market stand, a couple of weeks before the lockdown happened. This is Mistrial by Lou Reed, one of the 80s albums by Lou that I was still missing. And I think it was Jeff Calico Silver maybe who said that Lou Reed is one of the few artists from the 1960s and 70s who had a good 80s, and I would agree with that. He managed to, I don't know, he did some crunchy guitar albums. He didn't allow himself to get too bogged down in sort of 80s production. Yeah, really enjoyed that album, Mistrial. Going to be doing a Lou Reed collection video at some point, just need to get myself organised on it. So yeah, that was a goodie. Right, that's the finds done. Let's whiz through some fantastic record giftage. So this first one, this came from Steve, Psych in the Valleys, who did a brilliant video a while ago on his rock and roll collection. It was actually a response to my video. I showed a few half-cocked rock and roll LPs, and then Steve showed all this marvellous stuff. It was an amazing video. Steve's a great guy. He's got a real wide taste. You know, he's into his early rock and roll music, but he's also into a lot of modern stuff as well, and his reggae and his classic soul. Anyway, this is Johnny Burnett Trio. I had this on CD already, but it was great to get a copy of it. It's just classic rockabilly from the 50s. Their song, The Train Kept A-Rolling, famously was the first song that Led Zeppelin jammed together when they got into a rehearsal studio back in, it would have been 60, maybe 68, something like that. And apparently they almost took off the roof of the studio when they did that. Fantastic kind of febrile, you know, gut bucket, rockabilly playing from a trio of originators. And Steve also sent me this as well, which I was really pleased to get. This is a CD compilation of Link Wray. It's called The Original Rumble, and yeah, just kind of greasy 50s, loud, raucous electric guitar instrumentals. Can't beat it. Fantastic. So yeah, check out Steve's channel. I shall put some links down below to all these kind people, so you can go and check them out. 2 records came from John Downing, 6-inch pianist. I mentioned to him on one of our VC Zoom chats that we've been having recently that I was missing this record, and it's quite an expensive one. Trying to collect the Rycuda albums. This one was going at really daft prices online. I think it was maybe his 2nd or 3rd album, Into the Purple Valley. So John had a spare copy, or it was his copy, and I think he said he struggled a little bit with it. So he was kind enough to send me it. Really, really enjoyed it actually. Side 1 is fantastic. There's a great song called Teardrops Will Fall on it, which is brilliant. Rycuda is a bit of a, I think he's a slight sort of one of these Marmite artists. I've heard people on the VC say they struggle to get on with his voice, and the fact that he did so much very kind of, you know, he did a lot of early blues material, and I think it was Brian at Black Beans and Rice. He said he finds Rice music a bit cheesy sometimes. I think it's got a slight sort of theatricality to it. even though he was into very old forms of music, I think there's a sort of vaudevillian side to him, which I think some people do struggle with, and his voice as well I'd say is an acquired taste. But anyway, it was great to get that. So that's from John, 6-inch pianist, who also sent me a copy of this. This is Germ-Free Adolescence by X-Ray Specs, just a classic seminal punk album from the 1970s, featuring the wonderful polystyrene there, and it was great to get that because I've been wanting to do another of these A to Z collection specials, and I didn't have anything in my collection for X apart from XTC, so now I do. So yeah, great to get that, just for the music as well though, obviously. Just really kind of John to send it to me. Not the kind of record that you see every day in the wild, is it? Okay, so a couple of Otis Redding items. This one is in the shrink still because it's only just come through the door. This is Otis Redding, Ready Steady Otis, and this comes from Roswell Ryan, who is a wonderful chap living in Wales, who's been doing some wonderful videos for the last, I don't know, year or so now. His channel is growing. He's a really good, interesting collector. He's into some quite kind of left field stuff. He's into Captain Beefheart, and he's into XTC and John Hyatt and Tom Waits. He's got a really interesting take on things, and he bought this. Well, he thought he was getting another record by another artist. I think it might have been, what was it now? Was it a Tom Waits record? I can't quite remember. But this one came. No, it was a Scott Walker album he'd ordered, and this one came instead. So he dropped me a line and asked me if I wanted it, and I said I will take it off you gladly. Thank you very much. So this is Ready Steady Otis, and it's Otis Redding live. It's got quite a lot of his great versions on here. Satisfaction by Jagger and Richards, My Girl, Respect, all the goodies. So yeah, can't wait to crack that open. And this one, I'm going to show this briefly because this needs a video in its own right. This is an extraordinary gift which has come from Dean Logan in Australia. That's Grandma's Handbag. He got a really good deal on this, and kindness doesn't begin to describe it really. He bought it for me and sent it to me. This is the Otis Redding Definitive Studio Album Collection, all in mono, and you can see the albums there. Just a beautiful set. I'm halfway through it. I'll show you one of the records now, but I'm going to do a proper feature on this once I've got all 6 albums listened to, and I'll listen to the one that Ryan sent me as well. And do a feature on all these records, yeah, I mean, Dean also sent me a load of CDs as well and some other stuff. Dean, it's so kind of you. It just blows my mind that you would send an item of this heft and size all the way from Australia. So what can I say? The VC is a wonderful place, and there's a lot of very kind people out there. So yeah, thanks ever so much. I'm enjoying it immensely. That's Otis Redding, the Definitive Studio Album Collection. Just mind-blowing, really. So let's finish with some channel shoutouts. So all of these are in the UK, apart from John Kirwan, who is in Ireland. Big shout out to John. He's been doing some great work in the last few months, showing his David Bowie collection. He's also been doing some nice little thread responses and just doing interesting videos. Really nice guy. He's got a lovely speaking voice, nice to listen to. Check him out. A great addition to the VC. I want to give a shout out to John, that's Baggy Hi-Fi, who's been doing some great videos now for a number of months. John's got a very interesting collection. He's been showing some stuff that he's been finding in his garage recently. He used to be a fanzine editor, and he's got a great wealth of knowledge about music going back through the years, you know, 80s music. He did a great thing on Julian Cope recently, which is really interesting, and he does little humorous intros to his videos, which are very entertaining, and I always tune in to watch his videos. I think they're very informative. Gatefell33, which is Dale, he's been on the VC for a long time, but he's only been making videos reasonably recently, and I think he's one of these guys who stopped collecting vinyl and then got back into it with a vengeance, and he's now amassed a really big collection. He shows quite a lot of new things, you know, he buys albums on Bandcamp and he shows interesting records I haven't seen before, but he also shows a lot of old favourites as well. He likes jazz and classic rock and folk music and kind of 60s stuff. Really interesting collector, and seems like a really nice guy as well, so check him out. Another shout out to Chris at Vinyl Orchard, who's been making videos for a while. I think Chris is another chap who's been on the VC for a long time, but not making videos, but now he's kind of started to make them. Really big collection. He comes up with great ideas for threads, some of which I still need to jump on. Chris's favourite band is Deep Purple, and he's got an amazing collection of Deep Purple rarities and all kinds of things. Just a really interesting channel there with a great wealth of knowledge and a big record collection. Simon, big shout out to him. Again, this is Vinyl Dale and the Quest for the Holy Grail. You must check out Simon's videos if you haven't already. Great way to spend an afternoon. He's got a sense of humour, he's got a great collection, he has good ideas for videos. He's really into his 60s pop music. He likes Herman's Hermits and these bands that don't get much of a look in, so I would definitely recommend you watch Simon / Dale. His name is Simon, but he calls himself Dale on the VC for reasons that we are still trying to fathom. So there we go. And finally, a shout out to Gary Hall, who has been commenting on my videos for quite a while. He's now launched his own channel, and it's called In the Sticks. Gary's doing some great videos. The first couple of videos he did, he only talked about one record, and they were really interesting videos. So rather than showing loads of records, you know, like we all do, he'll pick one and he'll talk about it at length, about his own associations with it. But he's recently done a more sort of standard VC video where he showed or talked about, I think it was half a dozen records, and he did it in his attic while a storm was blowing outside, which I thought was quite nice. So yeah, I think Gary is the most recent of all those VC channels, and he's definitely looking for subs and views. So please do head over and check him out. I'll put the links down below for all these people. Okay. So that's it for now. Thank you all for watching. Thanks again to the people who sent me those records, and I'll be back soon for more vinyl fun. Take care, folks. See you soon. Bye bye.